Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. And friends, welcome back. We are once again in Calloway County with workers' compensation attorney Jeff Roberts. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing good, Jim. How are you?
But I'm doing fine. Today we're going to dive into the most recent report that came out from the Department of Workers' Claims. And this is a report that we've actually referenced before. In fact, I think it was back in episode 70 when we were talking about injuries to minors. We talked about the Kentucky Department of Workers' Claims annual report, but that was the previous year. That was 21-22, where we pulled out some of that data. And if you're interested in learning more about injuries to minors, again, that's episode 70. You can find right there on the website. But today we're going to focus in on the most recent report, 22-23, because there's some pretty interesting data in there and some things that actually surprised us, I think, from the number of injuries. So we're going to kind of break out, kind of where they're happening, why they're happening, and what kind of industries might actually be involved that are actually causing the injuries.
Yeah, I thought it might be interesting to dive into these numbers a little bit, to look at the industries that have the most injuries to them. And it was, some of the numbers kind of surprised me to start with after I kind of analyzed it a little bit. I think I figured out why that is to some extent, but it is. Some of the industries didn't surprise me, but the one that had the most or at least a high number of first reports of injuries was somewhat surprising to me. So.
I think so. So we're going to use a couple of terms here if you're listening, and I just wanted to ask Jeff to kind of define what we're talking about. There's an abbreviation in this report called an FROI, First Report of Injury, but there's also litigated claims. Do you kind of want to explain to all of us kind of what's the difference and why do they call them out like that?
First report of injury is if you're injured on the job and you notify the employer of that and the insurance carrier gets notified, they're supposed to notify the Department of Workers' Claims of that injury, and that's what that is. Especially if there's any lost time, if you have to miss work, it's definitely got to be reported to the Department of Workers' Claims at that point in time. A lot of employers will report even non-lost time injuries to the Department of Workers' Claims and should report those injuries to the Department of Workers' Claims from that. So that's what that's talking about. So if you are at work and if you're working at a manufacturing facility and you cut your arm on a part and have to go to the plant medical, they put a Band-Aid on it. That's supposed to be reported up even if nothing else occurs from that. It is supposed to be reported up the chain and go to the Department of Workers' Claims as a first report of injury there. Now, litigated cases are cases where the claim forms are filed to get the case in front of an administrative law judge and would go to have a judge decide it because you can't agree. Now, a lot of cases are settled without having to take that step, so cases that are settled don't show up as a litigated claim if they're settled prior to the claim forms being filed, which happens fairly regularly.
That makes sense. And you mentioned something here. When you're injured at work, under Kentucky law, you have to report that. And that is something that a lot of people think, well, I don't want my employer to think I'm hurt. Maybe I'll just hide it. But at some point, you're actually required, or you kind of give up a right. Is that correct?
Correct. In litigating these cases, there are some issues that I call threshold issues. Threshold issues means it's an issue that I've got to overcome to be successful in the case. If we don't overcome it, we don't get anything because we didn't overcome that threshold issue. And notice is one of those threshold issues. Kentucky law says that you have to give notice of a work-related injury within in a reasonable time. There is not a set time frame. It says as soon as practicable or something of that nature, but there's not a set time frame. I've had some employers take the position that if it wasn't reported within 24 hours, then it's not covered under workers' comp. There is nothing under Kentucky law that says that. And even if there's a union contract that says that, that union contract does not override Kentucky law.
Well, and I think in some of the episodes that we've done a lot of workers' comp related episodes on this podcast. That there's a lot of games that get played, and it's surprising to me that if a worker is showing up, doing the work at the plant, and is suddenly injured, that all those good feelings and all those, hey, glad you're here, that attitude changes, because now you're a liability, because now you're an expense to the corporation.
It certainly does with some corporations and some businesses where they take an adversarial approach with the injured worker right off the bat. And there's no need for it. There are other employers that realize that, if you're in business, employee, especially a manufacturing type of business or construction type business, you're going to have workers that get injured on occasion. And, workers' compensation is just a cost of doing business. Just like paying taxes is a cost. You've got to pay your taxes. You've got to buy workers' comp insurance, and you're unfortunately going to have an employee get injured at some point in time if you're a large enough employer and in business long enough period of time for that to occur. But some businesses don't look at it that way, but some do. In fact, I've had some local companies that were familiar with me who had an employee a couple of different times. They've had employees that were getting the runaround by the insurance company, and they didn't like it. And so they told their injured worker, go see Jeff, who will take care of you. And it's not often that the employer refers the worker to me, but it has occurred in the past.
You're saying you'll take them.
Yeah. But it was an employer that wanted their employee taken care of. And, the employee wasn't just a cog in the wheel. For them, it was, they were friends and all of that, and they wanted the employee taken care of. And frankly, I wish I'd see that a lot more. And I do see it some, but not as frequently as I'd like to see it.
Well, friends, if you're listening, we mentioned the duty to notify and being one of those threshold issues. I'm going to refer you back to episode 23, which focused on how to avoid workers' compensation mistakes. And again, if you go to jeffrobertslaw.com, go over to the media side, the podcast side, you're going to be able to listen to that. You can also listen out on Spotify and all these other places. And we posted to the Facebook page as well, so you can listen there. But if you just go to the website, you'll find a whole bunch of information. But episode 23 specifically talks about avoiding workers' comp mistakes. So with that being said, Jeff, let's go ahead and jump into this. You said the FROI, first report of injury, those are the injuries that get reported. And then you have claims. Those litigated claims are ones that went all the way to a judge. The judge had to get involved. But in the middle is all of these issues that tend to get settled out. Obviously, that's what a lot of what you do as an attorney is you try to settle it out before it has to be litigated. Because again, not everything has to go to a hearing.
Right. If I can get a fair settlement for my client before having to litigate the claim, it's better for the client because the costs go down. Once you start litigating the claim, the costs increase, and it's more time consuming as well. Once it gets litigated, it takes longer to get the claim resolved in that setting, but sometimes you have to. Yep. If they're not going to offer fair value for the claim, then you've got to litigate the claim, and that's just the way it is from there. But in looking at the first reports, transportation and warehousing had the most injuries during this period of time. By far, they were 6,500. The next closest was below 5,000 in that regard. And, that doesn't really surprise me a lot in that industry. You have a lot of lifting in the transportation, in the warehousing side, moving product off trucks, onto trucks, and around in the warehouse, et cetera. So you're going to incur more injuries, I think, in that setting, or it's likely that you're going to have more injuries in that setting. So that one did not surprise me as far as the first reports. And second one was manufacturing. Again, that's an injury where you've got a lot of movement, lifting heavy parts and things there. car manufacturing. I know the General Motors plant up in Bowling Green. They lift heavy parts there. There are we got Pella here in Murray that has some heavy windows that they have to lift, and different those type of industries. And there's lots of twisting, turning, doing overhead work as well in those, which injures your shoulders, your knees can get injured. So that one there didn't surprise me either. Healthcare and social assistance, I think primarily that's going to be in the healthcare field or in a hospital setting. Of course, you've got and a lot of times when people think of healthcare, they're focusing on the providers, the doctors, the nurses, but this also would include the laundry staff,
Cafeteria staff.
Cafeteria staff, maintenance people would be included in that as well. But then, of course, in the nursing side, that you're lifting heavy patients, combative patients at times in that regard, and so a lot that can be a very, very physical job as well, and result in the injuries. The one that was surprising to me was the educational services when I first looked at that. It's number 5 on the list, 3,643 first reports. And I was surprised just from the educational side of it, but then I got to thinking about that a little more, and you look at Western Kentucky University, Murray State University, you've got the cleaning people there, maintenance, grounds crew there. But then when you go and look at the numbers from an employment standpoint, they are some of the largest, the education side, some of the largest employers in a community. West Kentucky University is a very large employer for Warren County, for instance. Murray State University is a very large employer for Calloway County.
Go Racers.
Go Racers, exactly. But then you also look on that, and Callaway County not only has Murray State University, which is one of the larger employers, but the Callaway County Board of Education and the Murray Independent School District, all which would fall within that category. And then you go to Hopkinsville, and I know Hopkinsville has some satellite campuses there, but then Christian County Board of Education is going to be a large employer for Christian County and then Hopkinsville City School District. So I think part of those numbers are because they are such large employers in the some of the larger employers by industry, at least in the individual counties. Healthcare probably is also the same. When we talked about the healthcare, the nature of that work can be very heavy at times, and they are usually a big high employer by category for rural counties as well.
Well, specifically to the healthcare industry, if you're a nurse or if you work in a hospital or some other kind of healthcare clinic, you might want to check out episode 62. Episode 62 specifically talks about hospital injuries and workers' comp, because again, a lot of people don't think about that, but those are very strenuous, difficult jobs. We talked about falls in stairwells. We talked about all sorts of different things that can happen to a healthcare provider, actually. So this would be a healthcare professional or somebody in the janitorial, somebody in the environmental area, somebody in the plant, the hospital plant itself, the cafeteria, all these different areas that, again, put people at risk for an injury, and that's why these numbers tend to spike up. And then before we kind of jump into it, episode 61 specifically focused on factory accidents and industries or injuries. And as we kind of get into some of these numbers, some of these other breakouts, you might want to go back and look at episode 61, listen to episode 61. Just some really good information there.
Yeah. One that, if somebody were to look at these numbers, one that would be surprising if you think about it, if you don't know some of the laws, is the agriculture. It's got agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting, and there were 345 injuries. It's very low. Not the lowest, but it's very low as far as the number of injuries. And then you look at the injuries in that industry. But I think one of the reasons, because agriculture is an industry where injuries occur, certainly. One of the reasons for that, though, is agriculture is exempt from workers' comp in Kentucky. So the farmer has to choose to be covered under workers' compensation law for their agricultural business to be covered under Kentucky workers' comp. So, which some employers do. If you have migrant workers, you're required to do that by federal law. But if you don't have migrant workers, some have chosen to fall under it. Most have chosen not to fall under the workers' comp law. So if you're on a farm and you're injured and your employer doesn't have workers' comp coverage because they're not required to have workers' comp coverage, it never gets reported up. So that's underreporting because they don't have to report in that industry because they're not covered under workers' comp as a general rule.
That makes sense. Well, friends, if you've listened to a number of these podcasts, you know we have show notes, and that's going to be just kind of a written out summary of what we're talking about today. In that summary, I'm going to put a link to the 2022-23 report that we're referencing, and some of these macro numbers that Jeff just talked about are there on page 9 of that report. Jeff, if we take a step back, I mean, what's interesting, I'm on page 8 here. It looks like in page 8 for 2022 and 2023, the number actually dipped a little bit in terms of first reports of industry. So I guess, you know, again, that's good for the workers. There were fewer injuries or fewer reported injuries, but again, 36,000, almost 37,000. That's still a big number.
I think you're correct in that regard, but also I believe part of that is going to be because of, even though this is for first reports of injury, I think this is covering, would fall under COVID as well. And if you see 2020 and 2021, you had a spike there, and in 2021, 2022, a spike as well. And at least the DWC, as I understand it, Department of Workers' Claims, classified COVID as an injury from there. So in people, there was a coverage for being off work for COVID, and so they would file those workers' compensation first reports of injuries. Anytime someone had COVID and had to miss work, that would get filed. So I think that's part of the reason there was a spike on those 2 years.
That makes sense. Well, Jeff, let's transition. I'm on page 11 of this report.
Yes.
And it talks about claims by industry. And as you had alluded to earlier in the episode, manufacturing is really the largest bucket, if you will, of claims in the previous year. You've got the unclassified, which is huge, but that, they just didn't determine anything, so it's kind of a catch-all. But manufacturing, if you look around, we've got the GM plant, like you said, up in Bowling Green. You do a lot of work, actually, with UAW Local 2164 up there. We've got places like Union Underwear, which is Fruit of the Loom, there in Bowling Green as well. BG Metal Forming, which I think is an automotive subsidiary.
I believe so.
They do a lot of OEM supply there. So a lot of that, and then just look around, Western Kentucky, we have a lot of manufacturing. Some of it's heavy manufacturing, some of it's light manufacturing, but again, a lot of injuries that come up. And these are things that you see on a regular basis from people who have been injured at work. They're trying to figure out their rights. They're trying to figure out, hey, how do the benefits work and how do I get paid? If somebody has those kind of questions, what's the easiest way for them to get a hold of you?
Best way to get a hold of me is to call the office. 270-753-0053 is the phone number to reach my office. If you want to use the 800 number, it's 1-800-844-5108. If you call in to the office during business hours, unless we're busy on all the other phone lines, you're going to get a live person that answers the phone to talk with you. And if I'm available, I'll try to talk with you then. But if not, we'll set up a time and they'll get information from that. But we'll try to get any questions you have answered. And, as we've mentioned before, I've got offices in Murray. That's where my primary office is. I have an office in Hopkinsville as well, but it's just that one phone number they can reach me. You can reach me regardless of which office I'm in from that, but I do meet clients at other locations as well. Matter of fact, just last week I went to Bowling Green to meet with several clients I had up in that area, and going again next week to meet with some clients up in that area. So I do meet with clients in other locations and represent clients all over Kentucky. So.
Well, earlier when we were looking at some of the breakouts here, we talked about transportation and warehousing. Warehousing is basically distribution. You see a lot of these facilities popping up. You got Sun Products, obviously, up there in Warren County. There's a lot of these big facilities tend to. I don't know what it is, but that industry is rocking right now. At least it seems to be. I mean, wherever I drive through Kentucky or even in Indiana, I see a whole bunch of these complexes coming online. So I guess that's going to be a lot more potential injuries to people who maybe you slip, maybe you get some boxes, you got some lower back strains and some other things. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes.
Yeah, there's a lot of warehousing now. I know there's a Walmart warehouse in Hopkinsville area, Christian County, and I've represented people from there. I'm familiar with that facility, and a lot of other warehouses now that are popping up. Amazon, UPS both have facilities at different locations for warehousing, and all of that kind of, I think, falls under that category in the transportation category. And so, that's not surprising to me with that number. Now, from the claim by industry, and one of the things that did kind of jump out at me when you looked at the first reports of injury, the unclassified was the absolute lowest number for of industries there with 6, but then when you look by claim by industry, you got 1,055, substantially greater than the next one, which was below 450, and I think that's to some extent some of the companies trying to fudge the numbers, so to speak, so that because premiums are calculated to some extent, at least in part, by not only your history of injuries at your plant, but the history of injury in your area. Yeah. So if they throw these claims by claims in unclassified, they think that will maybe help with premiums down the road potentially. I'm not positive on that, but that's the only reason I can see that it jumps from being the lowest on first reports, but the highest in number of litigated claims, by far the highest in that regard. So, but then you come into the, when we talked about some of these others, like we talked about the educational, and it drops down considerably in this. In part of it, I think, is like we said earlier, it's a lot of people in those industries, so you're going to have a lot more first reports filed where people have minor things occur to them that gets reported and that gets all the way up to the Department of Workers' Claims, so they do show up in these statistics. But, those minor things don't generally develop into a litigated claim as well. So I think that's where you're seeing some of these numbers where the more serious injuries are the ones that are going to develop into the litigated claims.
Well, talking about serious injuries, I mean, at the bottom of page 11, you've got the claims by body part. And again, this is going back to 2022 to 2023. And it's kind of what we've talked about in previous episodes. The highest number is obviously where multiple body parts are impacted. So I've got a lower back injury with a neck injury with maybe something else that happened. So that kind of messes up the numbers a little bit because they combine that into one category. But the highest number of individual body part really comes down to shoulders, low backs, and knees. And you see that in manufacturing facilities all the time.
Absolutely. And but you see those are the spinal injuries, which is low back and neck, shoulder and knees are probably, or not probably, they are the biggest areas of the body that are injured that I see people calling me and coming to see me about from that. But frequently people have multiple injuries. A lot of times I have clients that have a neck and a shoulder injury. If they're lifting heavy weights up over their head, you can blow a disc in your neck and tear a rotator cuff when you're doing that repetitively over a long period of time. And you see that, and part of these numbers too are frankly just because of the way the system is set up now versus what it used to. I would draft the claim forms, and in the claim forms I would set out. My guy had a neck injury, he had a shoulder injury, and if he had a knee injury, we'd add that in there, and we'd list every one of those. Several years ago, the Department of Workers' Claims went to an electronic filing system, and on identifying the body parts injured, it's a checkbox system, and you can only get one box you can check. And so if I've got a client with a neck and a shoulder injury, I can't check neck and shoulder. I've got to check multiple body parts from there. So that's the reason you see that being so high, is because frequently people do have multiple injuries. Somebody has a carpal tunnel and a trigger finger, or carpal tunnel and a cubital tunnel injury, and so you can't just do one in that you've got to check multiple body parts. So that system has created, because they went to that system, they've made it to where that's nearly always going to be the highest category.
And that kind of makes sense. I think as we begin to transition in the final segment here, Jeff, you're located in Murray. You mentioned you've got the Murray office, you've got the Hopkinsville office, but you've been doing workers' comp claim for really 32 years now. I mean, so you've seen a lot of these industries, you've seen a lot of these different industry sectors, from agricultural to, type issues to educational, where, again, you may be dealing with a grounds maintenance person or something else, to where you're also dealing with heavy manufacturing. It's the wealth of experience that you bring to it. I know in a previous episode, we really spent some time talking about the Google reviews that you've received. And if somebody wants to go out and just Google Roberts Law Office, Murray, Kentucky, you'll see on the right side of the screen there a link to all those Google reviews. And what I really appreciate about that, and what I really appreciate about the opportunity to work with you, is the fact that so many of your clients have taken the extra step to talk about how you treated them with the case, how you either fought for them or explained things, or how you followed up with them. Those comments are earned, man, and I really appreciate the fact that your clients are doing that on your behalf, because I think that's a testament to the quality of work that you're actually delivering for the people here in Western Kentucky.
Well, thank you for saying that. I've been blessed over the 32 years to work with some really, really great staff. I have excellent staff that work with me here in the office, and I'm also been blessed to work for some excellent clients as well from that standpoint. But if you go to the website to look at stuff, you'll see the motto that we use here at my office. Myself and my staff try to live by this motto, which is to provide small town service, which is where the clients will talk about. They return calls, they explain things to me, make sure I know what was taking place, and then also try to deliver big city results. And obviously, if they weren't happy with the results, they wouldn't be giving me 5-star reviews. So I think that's hopefully bearing out that I am actually accomplishing what my goal is, and that is to do that for my clients. So
no, I appreciate it. Well, Jeff, let's in this report, a number of the pages deal with an actual county breakout, and I think that's where we got surprised. Really, I mean, certain things are there, right? So obviously, Jefferson County, the Louisville area, Fayette County, the Lexington area, they had the biggest numbers. They've just got big population centers there. But what really surprised me, and I probably both of us, but I know you live here, but Warren County over in Bowling Green is the third highest first report of injury and the third highest number of claims. And that really surprised me.
I was somewhat surprised as that as well. Bowling Green is a larger city in Kentucky, but I would really thought Franklin County, Frankfort area would have been
maybe Hardin County. Or something like
yeah,
that.
and some of the others would have been a higher population wise. I don't know the difference between Bowling Green or the Warren County area and Davies County in Owensboro. But yeah, I was somewhat surprised at those numbers because it was the third highest by a lot from that standpoint. So it was, as far as the first reports of injury, and then the highest in the litigated claims as well. And I was a little taken aback by that. I would have thought it would have been up there, but not number 3.
Right, and I think I misspoke when I said Warren County was the third highest in litigated claims. Actually, it tied with Boone County up in northern Kentucky, which again, I would have thought those population centers would have been
Yes.
a lot bigger in these reports. But definitely, wow. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, 1,500, first time reports of injury, and then you look at 29 claims. But as you said, a lot of workers' comp. A lot of those claims end up being settled, so they don't always get to a litigated claim. But still, even at that, Warren County was tied for the third highest in the
Right,
state.
yeah, and that's litigated claims. So that's ones that you're going through to, you're getting it in the front of a judge and going to a decision, is the way I read that from that standpoint. So as I said earlier, a lot of cases are resolved without having to litigate the cases. Some don't turn into a claim at all. It's not a permanent injury, so there's not a permanent disability claim associated with that. Others are permanent disability claims, but they are claims that can be resolved and should be resolved without having to litigate those. And I'm able to do that frequently for clients. And sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes they don't want to pay fair value. Sometimes it's just what I think the value of the case and what the insurance company thinks the value of the case is just different. We look at the claim differently, and so those cases can't get settled, and we have to file and get those get those into litigation. In some cases, get resolved during litigation once we get a defense attorney involved, and if necessary, we'll take it to a judge's decision, and if the judge commits an error and doesn't award my client what I think they're supposed to receive, and there's a legal error in that, we'll take it all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to.
Well, and speaking of that, there are a couple of episodes on the podcast where we've actually talked about you taking cases all the way up to the Supreme Court here in Kentucky, and that's
Yes.
Again, when you say, "Hey, I want a guy that's willing to fight for me and a guy that's willing to take it all the way," you have a history of doing that. So. And not faring too badly up there.
No, I've got a pretty good track record at the Supreme Court from that. Yes, and I've been there frequently. I looked the numbers up a long time ago, but I can't even recall what they are now. But yeah, I've been to the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court quite a bit on cases. And my track record is fairly good. Sometimes I take the case up there. Sometimes the other side takes the case up there. I'm at the Supreme Court now on a couple of cases that the other side is taking up on appeal, and I file cross appeals. But so you just got some cases have to go that route. So
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, again, thank you very much for your time here. I mean, this is, some people say, well, this wasn't really that interesting. No, it is when you look at this, and if you're in one of these industries that has these higher numbers, one, be careful. That first thing, be careful. Earn a good living, do the good work, but just be careful. But when something happens, if you suffer a workplace injury, you need to know there's somebody here in Western Kentucky that can absolutely handle the case, absolutely has a good track record, and has been living down here in Western Kentucky basically your whole life. You were born in Mayfield, right?
correct.
Yep. And
Born and raised in Mayfield. The only time I have not lived in Western Kentucky was the time I was in law school.
Exactly. And you were over in Southern Illinois, so it wasn't too far away. And then you came back home. Then you came back home. You've been practicing here for 32 years. So, Jeff, thanks again for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks for the insights on the report and how to kind of weed through some of the numbers. And friends, if you're listening to this, please do us a favor. Go out and check out the podcast and the other episodes out there. You can find it at jeffrobertslaw.com. There's a tab that says media, and you'll see podcasts right there. But you can also check it out on iHeartRadio. You can check it out on Spotify, Amazon Music, and a whole bunch of other places. We hope you enjoy it. We try to take these legal issues and kind of boil them down a little bit so they kind of make sense, because the law's complicated. But when you're involved in a situation that deals with workers' compensation, deals with personal injury, such as a truck wreck or a car wreck or a motorcycle accident, or even a Social Security disability case, Jeff Roberts handles all three of those types of cases right here in his office in Murray, and also in his office up in Christian County up in Hopkinsville. So, Jeff, I guess we'll be back in about 2 weeks, all right?
Thank you, Jim.
All right, buddy. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.